Assalamu alaikum, students. So today I'm going to start with the renal system. We are going to do the kidney. You have already done the bladder. And in kidney, we are going to do glomerular diseases, tubulointerstitial diseases, nephroerythritis, that is stones in the kidney, and then tumors of the kidney. So today I'm going to explain to you the glomerulonephritis. Mostly we are going to do glomerulonephritis, and then we'll do tubulointerstitial nephritis, and then I'm going to do renal stones, and then tumors of the kidney. The kidney, as all of you know by your physiology, it excretes waste products of metabolism. It regulates the body's concentration of water, salt, calcium, phosphorus, anions, and cations, and maintains the acid-base balance in the plasma. Kidney secretes erythropoietin, renin, prostaglandins, and regulates vitamin D metabolism. Erythropoietin, you know, is very important for your formation of red blood cells. Renin angiotensin mechanism is there to maintain the blood pressure. Then prostaglandins and vitamin D metabolism is also done by the kidney. The kidney disease affects all the four components. These four morphological components are glomeruli, tubules, interstitium, and blood vessel. So I'm just going to quickly do the first anatomy and then the microscopic appearance of glomeruli in order to make you understand the glomerular diseases. So if you see kidney, when this is a cut section of the kidney, this is renal cortex. These are renal medulla. Okay, the renal vein exits at the pole and renal artery enters it, and the ureter comes out of the renal hilus, which is called hilus. This is renal pelvis. The medulla has got pyramids. These are major and minor calyces which are present in the medulla, and the cortex which contains both the glomeruli and the tubules. Okay, so this is the cut section or longitudinal section of the kidney. It is again the same picture showing the same structures. This is again showing the same structures. You can see the renal papillae. And this is renal cortex, outer is renal cortex, inner is medulla, and this is renal pelvis from where the artery enters, vein leaves, and ureter also leaves with the formation of urine. Okay, so then next is the structure of the glomerulus. Glomerular structure is very important to understand in order to understand the glomerular diseases. You know, this is the glomerulus. Glomerulus encircled by the Bowman's capsule, and this area is known as Bowman's space or urinary space. I will explain it in the next diagram. This is the macula densa, proximal convoluted tubules with the brush border, and this is glomerulus, as I've already said, distal convoluted tubules, and this is the basement membrane of the tubules. Okay, this diagram I'm going to explain to you in a bit detail. When the afferent arterioles, it enters the glomerulus, it divides into tuft of capillaries. What is a glomerulus? It is tuft of capillaries, and then it has got a mesengium inside. Mesengium is with the mesangial cells. Okay, this is mesengium with a mesangial cell. Now the structure of this one arteriole is very important because in your glomerular diseases, this is the area which is affected, leading to glomerulonephritis of different kinds. It is the epithelium of these capillaries are fenestrated epithelium. Fenestrated epithelium means that they have got pores in between. Okay, then there is a basement membrane. This basement membrane composed of three components: lamina densa interna and externa, and the lamina densa which is present in the middle. And then there are visceral epithelial cells which are known as they are known as podocytes, and they have got foot processes in them. Okay, so we have got podocytes with foot processes, basement membrane, and an endothelium lining which has also got fenestration, or they have got gaps in between. Fenestrated epithelium is also present in the liver. All of you know that from your histology. And you can also see filtration slits which are present in between the podocytes. Okay, so this is the structure of a glomerular capillary, and it is very important for the ultrafiltration of plasma. As I've told you, this is a Bowman space. Bowman space is also called urinary space, and it is the parietal layer of epithelium. This is proximal convoluted tubule, and this is distal convoluted tubule, and macula densa is also present. These are the granular cells, and mesengium or extra mesengial glomerular cells can be seen as well. So this is also juxtaglomerular apparatus explaining the same thing. This is the structure of the glomerulus by light microscopic appearance, and this is also the structure of the glomerulus with the markings. So one is the Bowman's capsule. Number two is the parietal epithelium. Urinary space is present. Then you have got these capillary loops. Then you have got vestral epithelium, basement membrane, endothelium, and mesengium. Okay. So this is the same diagram. So you can see this is a larger diagram of the capillary. In order to make you understand, this is the lumen, endothelial cells which are fenestrated, having gaps in between. These are epithelial cells with their food processes or podocytes, and this is the basement membrane, which again is divided into lamina densa, rara interna and externa, and lamina densa, which is present in the middle. Okay, and these are the mesengial cells. This is the histology of a normal glomerulus. So next we are going to do clinical manifestation of renal disease. How these renal diseases manifest clinically. So number one is azotemia. Azotemia means elevation of blood urea nitrogen and creatinine levels which are related to decreased glomerular filtration rate. This is a feature of acute and chronic glomerular injury. So in the case of glomerular injury, the blood urea which is excreted by the kidney is going to rise. There is also going to be rise in blood urea nitrogen, and glomerular filtration is going to decrease. There can be pre-renal azotemia and post-renal azotemia. Pre-renal azotemia means when there is decreased blood flow to the kidney or hypoperfusion of the kidney, this can get into the hypotension or decrease in the blood pressure, or increased fluid loss, which also decreases the blood pressure, or in the shock or in the volume depletion. And sometimes in congestive cardiac failure, when the blood is not being pumped by the heart, it can also lead to decrease in the blood flow of the kidney, leading to pre-renal azotemia. Post-renal azotemia. Post-renal azotemia is also due to obstruction to the urinary outflow distal to the kidney. So azotemia can be because of the kidney lesions, which can be because of glomerular lesions, pre-renal because of decrease in the blood flow, and post-renal because of the obstruction to the urinary outflow, which we are going to do because of the stones it can occur, or because of the tumors, leading to hydronephrosis of the kidney, which I am going to explain to you later on. Next is uremia. When azotemia becomes associated with clinical signs and symptoms and both biochemical abnormalities, it is known as uremia. Next is nephritic syndrome. Nephritic syndrome is caused by glomerular diseases, and nephritic syndrome is characterized by visible hematuria or microscopic hematuria, red blood cells cast in the urine, mild to moderate proteinuria, and hypertension. So whenever there is glomerular damage, person is going to some of the glomerular lesion will lead to nephritic syndrome, and some of the glomerular lesion will lead to nephrotic syndrome. This is very important, both nephritic and nephrotic syndrome. These questions are asked in your Viva exam, in your OSPE exam, and in your MCQs, STQs. Viva it's mostly nephritic and nephrotic syndrome, and their differences are asked from many of the students, if not all of you. Nephritic syndrome is characterized by visible hematuria or microscopic hematuria. Microscopic hematuria means when you do the urine examination, you see red blood cells in the urine, which the color of the urine becomes slightly changed, but there is no visible red color in the urine. That is called microscopic hematuria. Then red blood cells cast are seen in the urine, mild to moderate proteinuria is present, and hypertension means high blood pressure is present in these patients. Nephrotic syndrome. Nephrotic syndrome is characterized by glomerular diseases, and it is characterized by heavy, massive proteinuria, which is more than 3.5 grams per day. So this is the difference between nephritic and nephrotic syndrome. In nephritic syndrome, proteinuria is present, but it is mild to moderate. But in nephrotic syndrome, heavy proteinuria is present. It is more than 3.5 grams per day. There is going to be hypoalbuminemia because albumin becomes less as it is lost, and the liver is not able to synthesize that much amount of albumin which is lost in the urine every day, and there is going to be severe edema in the tissues, and there is going to be hyperlipidemia and lipiduria. I'm going to explain the pathophysiology of nephrotic syndrome when I do the nephrotic syndrome with you. Okay. Next is the asymptomatic proteinuria and hematuria. It means that there are no symptoms to the patient, but Microscopic hematuria can be seen or proteinuria can be seen because of different glomerular abnormalities. Acute kidney injury. Acute kidney injury is characterized by rapid decline in glomerular filtration rate within hours to days with concurrent dysregulation of fluid and electrolyte balance and retention of metabolic waste products excreted by the kidney, urine, and increase in the blood urea and creatinine. Next is oliguria and anguria. Reduced or no urinary flow. Oliguria means less amount of urine outflow and anguria means no urine is going to be flowing out of the kidney. It can result from severe glomerular injury, interstitial vascular acute tubular injury. So up till now, the clinical manifestation renal disease we have done azotemia, pre-renal, renal, and post-renal. Uremia, nephrotic syndrome, asymptomatic proteinuria, acute kidney injury, and oliguria and anguria. In chronic kidney disease or chronic renal failure, it is defined as the presence of decreased glomerular filtration rate that is persistently less than 60 milliliter per unit or 1.73 milliliter square for at least 3 months from any cause or persistent albuminuria. It is the result of all chronic parenchymal disease. So all these kidney diseases will result into chronic kidney disease leading to end-stage renal disease or chronic kidney disease in which glomerular filtration rate is decreased more than 60 ml per minute. Then end-stage renal disease, the glomerular filtration rate is less than 5% of normal. Terminal stage of uremia is known as end-stage renal disease. Renal tubular defects. Renal tubular defects can lead to polyuria. Nocturia means excessive quantity of urine. Nocturia, urine at night, electrolyte disorders or metabolic acidosis. Urinary obstruction and renal tumors, they have varied symptoms. Urinary tract infections are characterized by bacteriuria and pyuria. Nephrolithiasis is the formation of renal stone. It is characterized by renal colic and hematuria. Okay, so these are the clinical manifestation of renal disease, which I'm going to explain with each and every renal disease as well. So this is just an overall view of clinical manifestation of renal diseases. Next, we are going to do glomerular diseases. They are very important from your exam point of view as well. And we are going to, and your Viva point of view as well. Okay? Okay. So there are primary glomerular diseases, there are secondary glomerular diseases, and there are glomerular diseases which are because of metabolic disorders. So first, I'm going to give you a list of glomerular diseases, and then I'm going to explain you one by one. In primary glomerular diseases, which are known as glomerulopathies, there is number one is acute proliferative glomerulonephritis. Number two is rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis. Both these produce nephritic syndrome. Then membranous nephropathy, minimal chain disease, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis. And they all produce nephrotic syndrome, which I'm going to describe when I'm going to describe each one of them separately. Dense deposit disease, IgA nephropathy, chronic glomerulonephritis is because of end stage of all of these diseases can lead to chronic glomerulonephritis. So primary glomerular diseases is acute proliferative glomerulonephritis, rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis, membranous nephropathy, minimal chain disease, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, dense deposit disease, IgA nephropathy, chronic glomerulonephritis. This table is given in your Robbins as well. Then there are systemic diseases with glomerular involvement. SLE. SLE you have all done in third year. This is systemic lupus erythematosus, which is an autoimmune disorder. When antibodies are formed against your own kidney tissue, it is leading to nephritis, or it is also called lupus nephritis. Then diabetes mellitus affects kidney. Amyloidosis can affect kidney. Goodpasture syndrome, when there is involvement of the lung as well as in the glomerular basement membrane. Microscopic polyarthritis, Wagner's granulomatosis, you have already done Wagner's in your CVS, Enoch-Schollin purpura, and bacterial endocarditis. They are all can lead to renal disease because of systemic involvement in the kidneys. Okay. Next is the hereditary disorder. In hereditary disorder, we have Alport syndrome and we have thin basement membrane disease and Fabry's disease. People are born with these hereditary disorders, okay? Then glomerular syndrome, the syndrome which I've already explained to you, the clinical manifestation, the glomerular syndrome which are going to be produced by these diseases are nephritic syndrome, which I've told you, nephrotic syndrome, rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis, in which kidney function is going to deteriorate rapidly, chronic renal failure, in which glomerular filtration is going to be decreased more than less than 5% of the normal, and isolated urinary abnormalities, in which you can see only hematuria and albuminuria, which is an isolated urinary abnormality. So this is a list of primary glomerular diseases, secondary systemic glomerular diseases, or you can call secondary as well. Hereditary disorder, glomerular syndrome, I've already told you one by one, but with each glomerulonephritis, I'm going to tell you which one is leading to nephritic syndrome and which one is leading to nephrotic syndrome. So there is a classification of glomerular disease by distribution. Now you have to remember that in order to understand the glomerular lesion. Classification disease distributed when many glomeruli are considered. When you are considering focal glomerulosclerosis, it means many glomeruli will show. Sclerosis means that there is going to be disruption of the normal architecture of the glomeruli. The kidneys are, sorry, the renal capillaries are going to be replaced by sclerosis of these glomeruli. Then diffuse. Diffuse means this is affecting most or all glomeruli. Focal means disease affecting only some of the glomeruli, and diffuse means disease affecting most or all of the glomeruli. Then classification disease distribution when single glomeruli considered, segmental. Only one segment of a glomerulus is affected. Only one or two capillary loops means are affected. Or global means all of the capillary loops of that glomerulus is going to be affected. So focal means only few of the glomeruli, diffuse means many of the glomeruli affected, segmental means only one segment of a glomerulus is affected, and global means all of the glomerulus is affected by that disease. Okay. Next is the histological alterations which we can see in these glomerular diseases. We can see hypercellularity, basement membrane thickening, hyalinosis, and sclerosis. So what does hypercellularity means? It means increase in the number of cells in the glomerular tuft. This hypercellularity is comprised of one or more combination of mesangial endothelial cell proliferation, leukocyte infiltration, or formation of crescents. So if you go back to this picture, which I explained you can see they are mesangial cell present, they are endothelial cell present. Hypercellularity means there is proliferation of these mesangial cells as well as proliferation of these endothelial cells and influx of inflammatory cells within the glomeruli, and they will lead to increase in the size of the glomerulus. Instead of a normal glomerulus, you can see increase in the size of the glomerulus. So this is the hypercellularity. And formation of crescents, I'm going to explain you when we are going to do the rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis. Next is the basement membrane. I told you the basement membrane comprises of lamina, rara, interna, externa, and a middle layer of basement membrane. So on light microscopic appearance, there is going to be thickening of the capillary walls, and this is best appreciated by para-iodic acid chip stain, which is PA stain, which will stain them magenta pink in color. On electron microscopy, it can be one of the two forms. Either there is going to be deposition of amorphous electron-dense material on the endothelial side of the glomerular basement membrane or within the glomerular basement membrane itself. I told you the capillary has got three layers. First is the inner is the endothelial lining, then middle is the basement membrane, and outer is the epithelial lining, which are known as epithelial cells with the foot processes or podocytes. So any one of this area can become thickened by the electron microscopy, but in the light microscopy, you are only see a homogeneous thickening of basement membrane, which is seen by para-iodic acid chip stain. Then thickening of the basement membrane due to increased synthesis of proteins component as occur in the diabetic glomerulosclerosis. So there is only going to be increase in the synthesis of protein components, which will make this glomerular basement membrane appears very thick. Hyalinosis. Hyalinosis denotes the accumulation of material that is homogeneous and eosinophilic by light microscopic examination. By electron microscopic examination, the hyaline is extracellular, amorphous, made up of lead plasma proteins from circulation into the glomerular structure. Hyalinosis is a consequence of endothelial or capillary wall injury. So in the case of hyalinosis, we are going to see accumulation of material that is homogeneous and pinkish in color by or eosinophilic in color and by light microscopy. By electron microscopy, the hyaline material is amorphous, made up of lead plasma protein from the circulation to the glomeruli. Hyalinosis is a consequence of endothelial or capillary wall injury, and in case of hyalinosis, the glomerular function is going to be lost. Next is sclerosis. Sclerosis is characterized by accumulation of extracellular collagenous material either confined to the mesangial areas or involving the capillary loops or both. So the changes which are seen histologically in glomeruli are hypercellularity, basement membrane thickening, hyalinosis, and sclerosis. That's why I explained you the glomerular structure before going into the injuries. So what is the pathogenesis of glomerular injury? Underlying mechanism or pathogenesis of glomerular injury. Immune mechanisms mostly underlie most forms of primary glomerular injuries and many of secondary glomerular diseases. So the list I have given you of primary glomerular diseases, mostly these are immunological in origin, and as well as some secondary glomerular disorders like lupus nephritis is immunological or autoimmune disorder, as I've already explained you. So these mechanisms can be antibody mediated, they can be in situ immune complex deposition, circulating immune complex mediated, cytotoxic antibodies form cell mediated immune injury, activation of alternate complement pathways. You have done all of this when you were in your third year. So I'm going to explain one by one when I'm going to explain the glomerular injury. Either it is going to be antibody mediated, or there can be in situ immune complex deposition, or circulating immune complex are going to be deposited in the glomeruli because of the charge and the filtration which occurs through the glomeruli. So cytotoxic antibodies are going to be formed against the glomerular cells, leading to injury or activation of alternate complement pathway. So antibody mediated can be against fixed antigens or planted antigens. Fixed antigens are those antigens which are present within the glomeruli, and they are glomerular antigens. This can be NC1 domain products, antiglomerular basement membrane nephritis is of this type, hematonephritis and mesangial antigens. These are all fixed antigens which are present in each and every glomeruli. Planted antigen can be from the exogenous sources. They are come into the glomeruli because glomerulus has a function of filtration. So these exogenous or planted antigens can be infectious agents which come and plant into the glomerular basement membrane. They can be drugs, they can be endogenous as well, like DNA products, nuclear proteins, or immunoglobulins. They can also come when they become disintegrated and can lodge into the glomeruli. These are the planted antigens. So antibody mediators is fixed antigen which are glomerular antigen, or they can be planted antigen which can come and plant into the glomeruli. Next is immune complex mediated, endogenous antigens and exogenous antigen. Immune complexes are formed against the endogenous, which can be DNA or tumor antigen, or exogenous, which can be infectious antigen. So we have got glomerular injury by all these mechanisms: antibody mediated, in situ immune complex, circulating immune complex, cytotoxic, or activation of alternate pathway. Antibody mediated, I already told you that it is because of fixed or planted antigen. Immune complex is also because of endogenous antigens around which immune complexes are formed, or exogenous antigens around which immune complexes are formed. These immune complexes can lodge into the glomerular basement membrane, leading to glomerular injury. So next is the non-immune mechanism of glomerular cellular injury. This is metabolic disease like diabetic nephropathy. This is not immunologically mediated Fabry's disease. Hemodynamic stresses like systemic hypertension can give rise to glomerular injury. Deposition of material, amyloidosis. Amyloidosis you have done in your third year. It is pinkish acellular material, which is beta plated, and they get deposited into the kidney, leading to the sclerosis of the glomeruli and leading to nephropathy. Inherited glomerular diseases like Alport syndrome, they are all non-immune mechanism of glomerular injury. So glomeruli are mostly affected by immunological mechanism, especially primary glomerular diseases, which are antibody mediated, immune complex mediated, and non-immune mechanisms are seen in metabolic disorders, hemodynamic disorders, deposition in case of amyloidosis, and inherited glomerular diseases, which is Alport syndrome. So pathogenesis of glomerular injury continued. Diseases which are caused by in situ formation of immune complexes. It means in this form, immune complexes are formed locally in the glomeruli by antibodies that react with the intrinsic tissue antigens or with extrinsic antigens or planted antigens. As I've told you, in the glomeruli, there are fixed antigens. Antibodies can come and form in situ immune complexes on them, or the planted antigens, which are in the glomeruli because of the filtration, they come and lodge in the glomeruli. These are known as planted antigen. Antibodies can form against them as well, leading to either in situ formation of immune complexes. Membranous glomerulopathy is the classical example of glomerular injury resulting from local formation of immune complexes. Immune complexes are formed along the subepithelial side of the basement membrane. By fluorescence microscopic immune deposition is in the form of granular deposit. So in the case of in situ formation of immune complexes, the immune complexes will appear granular on immunofluorescent microscopy. Antibodies against the planted antigen. Antibodies can react in situ with antigens that are not normally present in the glomeruli but are planted on them. Planted antigens, as I've told you, can be DNA, nucleosome, nucleoproteins, bacterial products, and large aggregated proteins. So planted antigens can be from the DNA products, nucleosome, which are the products of the nuclei, nucleoproteins, bacterial products, large aggregated proteins. They can also come and lodge into the glomeruli, and the antibodies are formed against these antigens, and they are planted on the glomeruli. Antibodies, when they bind to the planted antigens, they produce discrete pattern of IgA deposition detected as granular staining by immunofluorescence, which is similar to immune complexes formed by intrinsic antigens. So whether the antigens are intrinsic or whether the antigens are planted, the antibodies which form against them and which lodge on them will both produce granular staining on immunofluorescence. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Diseases caused by in situ formation of immune complexes, either they are intrinsic antigen themselves or they are extrinsic antigens which are lodging on the glomerular basement membrane. Both of these will form granular deposit on the immunofluorescence microscopy. Then diseases caused by antibodies directed against the normal components of glomerular basement membrane. Antiglomerular basement membrane disease, we can also call it antiglomerular basement membrane antibody-induced glomerular nephritis. Antibodies bind to intrinsic antigen which are present in the glomerular basement membrane. They are homogeneously distributed along the entire length of glomerular basement membrane. They are not present here or there. They are present around the entire length, and they will produce a linear pattern of staining by the immunofluorescence technique. So when the antibodies are planted on the antigens which are of the glomeruli or planted, they will form granular deposit. But when they are against the glomerular basement membrane antigens, then they form a linear deposit all along the glomerular basement membrane by immunofluorescence staining. Antiglomerular basement membrane antibodies can cross-react with other basement membrane as well, especially in the alveoli. When they cross-react with alveolar basement membrane, they produce a syndrome which is known as Goodpasture syndrome. We have already done Goodpasture syndrome when I did lungs with you in your respiratory system. Okay. So antiglomerular basement antibodies can also cross-react with other basement membrane, especially in the alveoli or lungs, resulting in Goodpasture syndrome. Then next is glomerulonephritis resulting from circulating immune complexes. There are certain circulating immune complexes in the body because of the antigen-antibody reaction. Either they are formed against the exogenous antigens or endogenous. So glomerular injury is caused by trapping of these antigen-antibody complexes within the glomeruli. And this trapping is because of physicochemical properties and hemodynamic factor. As all of you know, glomerulus has a filtration function. So this filtration function, the antibodies and antigen complexes have to be filtered out. So some of them, they cannot be filtered out. If they are larger, then they are going to be lodged on the glomeruli and they can lead to formation of antigen antibody complexes which are on the, they are going to lodge on this glomerular basement membrane, and this is because of the physicochemical and hemodynamic factor. So as I've told you, pathogenesis is immunologically mediated. I told you antibody and immune complex mediated. Then I told you non-immunological injury, which I've given you this chart. And then pathogenesis is the antigens, antibodies. Antigens can be the intrinsic antigen or the antigens can be extrinsic antigen. The antibodies which are formed against both of them will produce a granular pattern. And the antibodies which are directed against the glomerular basement membrane, they will form a linear pattern. And this can also cross-react with the other basement membranes like of the lung, leading to Goodpasture syndrome. And then there is circulating antigen antibody complexes which can come and lodge into the glomeruli, resulting in injury to the glomeruli because of the physical, chemical, and hemodynamic factors. Okay. So if you see this diagrams, localization of immune complexes in the glomerulus, this is a good diagram to explain. They can be present on the subepithelial side, and these are known as subepithelial humps. Okay. And number two, these are epimembranous deposit in between the membrane. They can be formed. They are known as epimembranous deposit. Subepithelial, epimembranous, or subendothelial. Under the endothelial cells, they can deposit, or they can deposit into the mesangial deposit. Okay, this is also written here. Subepithelial deposit, epimembranous deposit, subendothelial deposit, and within the mesangium. These can be is the localization of immune complexes in the glomeruli. This diagram is also given in your opens. Okay. I understand glomerulonephritis is a difficult topic, so I'm trying to explain as much as I can. And if there are any questions, you can write in your to me in your WhatsApp group, or you can send me in your this text as well in this lecture. Okay. Then mediators of glomerular injury. Once these deposits are formed, which are because of antigen antibody reactions, what is going to happen? Why the mediators of glomerular injury are those mediators which are also mediators for any other inflammatory process. They can be the cells which come into the play are neutrophils and monocytes. Neutrophils and monocytes are also involved in other inflammatory processes. The oxygen-free radicals are produced which can destroy the glomerular basement membrane. Then other cells are macrophages and T lymphocytes, platelets. They also secrete mediators of inflammation. And resident glomerular cells, which are mesangial cell, also take part in the injury of the glomerulus by secreting mediators. Then we have soluble mediators which are present in the plasma. They can be activated by complement system. Echonocytes, nitric oxide, angiotensin, endothelin. They can also lead to glomerular injury, cytokines, chemokines, coagulation system. So the mediators of glomerular injury are cell mediators and soluble mediators. Okay. Glomerular injury determined by the immune complex localization. But I'm going to explain to you with each and every of the glomerular injuries. So number one, the primary glomerulonephritis we are going to do one by one. Number one is acute proliferative glomerulonephritis. Acute proliferative glomerulonephritis is a condition which is characterized histologically by diffuse proliferation of glomerular cell associated with influx of leukocyte. So there is going to be proliferation of glomerular cell as well as influx of WBCs in the within the glomerulus. These can be neutrophils and lymphocytes. The lesions are typically caused by immune complex deposition. The inciting antigen may be endogenous or can be exogenous. The prototype exogenous antigen-induced plasma pattern is post-infectious glomerulonephritis. Acute proliferative glomerulonephritis is post-infectious glomerulonephritis, which can be post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis and non-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. So post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis and non-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, both of these are going to produce nephritic syndrome. If an examiner asks you what is the causes of nephritic syndrome, you can say acute proliferative glomerulonephritis of both types, post-streptococcal and non-streptococcal. This can give rise to nephritic syndrome. Nephritic syndrome, I've already told you what I'm going to tell you again now. Post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis is an immunological disease or immune complex disease. It is typically seen in children between 6 to 10 years of age when they have, after 1 to 2 weeks of pharyngeal infection and infection of the skin. Both these infections are by group A beta hemolytic streptococci. So antibodies which are formed against group A beta hemolytic streptococci are going to cross-react with the antigens within the glomeruli, leading to glomerulonephritis, and it is an immune complex etiology. So bacteria, you should remember that, are not damaging the kidney. This is the antibodies which are formed against group A beta hemolytic streptococci. They form immune complexes with the antigens which are present in the glomeruli. Okay. So antigen antibody reaction is seen, especially it's seen in children between 6 to 10 years of age after 1 to 2 weeks of streptococcal infection by group A beta-hemolytic streptococci. So this immune complex disease produces nephritic syndrome. Nephritic syndrome, as I've told you, characterized by hematuria, blood in the urine, red blood cell cast in the urine, proteinuria, which is not marked, and hypertension. Hypertension is increase in the blood pressure. Clinically, the child will present to you with abrupt onset of gross hematuria. You can, the child's mother can tell you that he is passing a red color urine, and also there is going to be edema. Proteinuria is there, but it is not, is less. It is not of nephrotic range. Blood pressure of the child is also increased, and there is going to be impaired renal function test. So you remember that if some examiner is asking you pathogenesis post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, you are going to say it is an immune complex mediated disease. The immunological reaction is because of the antibodies which are produced against group A beta-hemolytic streptococci. They will cross-react with the glomerular basement membrane antigen, especially seen in the children between 6 to 10 years of age after 1 to 2 weeks of post-streptococcal infection. And the child is going to present with nephritic syndrome, okay, with abrupt onset. I hope this is clear. So why we are saying it is an immunological reaction? Because the latent period between infection and the onset of nephritis is compatible with the time required for the production of antibodies and formation of immune complexes. It is immunological because it is occurring after 1 to 2 weeks of infection. So this 1 to 2 weeks is a sufficient time for the production of antibodies and formation of immune complexes. And there is deposition of circulating immune complexes which fix complement and they in fact polymorphonuclear leukocyte. This, because of the increase in cellularity, this will going to choke the blood supply within the glomerular capillaries. The glomeruli become bloodless, means there will be less blood in them, and they will appear as hypercellular, increase in the size of the glomerulus. This explains the oliguria, edema, and hypertension, which is leading to the nephritic syndrome. 2 to 5% of these patients can go die during acute episode, but it is a disease which always reverts back to normal. In most of the cases, the patient becomes normal. Okay, so this is the light microscopic changes which is seen in the glomeruli. You can see these, these neutrophils which are present within the glomeruli. The glomeruli has become larger in size. It has become hypercellular. If you compare it with the normal glomerulus, I show you can see this is going to be increased in size because of the proliferation of endothelial cells, mesangial cells, and also because of the influx of these lymphocytes which are and polymorphonuclear leukocyte, both leukocyte and polymorphonuclear leukocyte. Okay. So you see a large hypercellular glomeruli. Hypercellularity is caused by infiltration of both leukocytes and monocytes, proliferation of endothelial and mesenchymal cells, and in severe cases there will be crescent formation, which is not seen in this diagram, which is only rarely. Interstitial edema can be seen. Tubules often contain red cell cars. Interstitial edema means edema in between the tubules. And in the tubules, these are the tubules. Sometimes red cell cars can be seen as well. This is the immunofluorescent microscopy. You can see the granular deposits. These are all granular deposits, which are because of the IgG, IgM, and C3 in the mesangium and along the glomerular basement membrane. This is along the glomerular basement membrane. You can see the immunofluorescent deposits. Immune complexes deposits are almost universally present and can never be focal or spheres in this case. So electron microscopy, you can see subepithelial deposits are present within the epithelial side of the basement membrane. These findings are discrete amorphous electron dense deposit on the epithelial side of the basement membrane. So whenever I'm describing the microscopic picture in glomerulonephritis, we have to describe all three of them: light microscopy, immunofluorescent microscopy, and electron microscopy. Okay, so I'm going to finish the lecture now. And if there are any questions, you can type them in your WhatsApp group. Thank you. Bye.